Okay, well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Heromakers Podcast. Ann, I'm excited because we're in the double digits now with these the podcasts, and we've received excellent response. So I'm very excited about that too. And I have to say, Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yeah, because up in Canada, I know that you over the weekend that was like your big holiday, right?
Yeah.
So did you do anything for Thanksgiving?
Well, in Ontario and in Toronto specifically where I live, Thanksgiving was canceled
It was
because of COVID.
the world is canceled because of COVID.
Yeah. So we weren't able to gather. I was going to gather up with some friends and have Thanksgiving dinner, but we couldn't. So I had so I had sushi.
Yes.
But
Typical Thanksgiving meal. That's great.
But then I did actually go for a bike ride to watch the salmon spawning. So that's really
amazing.
beautiful and quiet and peaceful.
Yeah, that's so fun. I don't think we have any salmon down here. I don't know. We'll have to ask our guest if he has salmon down in Texas.
Yes.
Or like in a pocket where it doesn't exist. They don't exist apparently. I don't know. So Ann, I am very excited about our guest today, Daron Babcock. And Daron is down in the Dallas area, but specifically this little community called Bonton. Did I say that right, Daron? Is it Bonton?
Bonton, yes.
Bonton. And so Daron, I am kind of hesitant to say that, but when I think of you, I don't know if you know of Chip and Joanna Gaines.
None of them. I don't know them, but I know.
Oh, you do? Okay, so they're down in Texas, in Waco, the Waco area, right? And so when I was reading about your website, I was thinking about them too, because they have a market and they're doing things to revitalize their community, and just it's fun. So Daron, you kind of dreamt up this idea of Bonton farm, and you're going to tell us all about it. And I'm very excited because it's kind of entrepreneurial, right? Where you saw a need, yeah, and then you stepped into that need, and so this is great. So Daron, welcome. Welcome. And why don't you start by telling us about yourself and about how you got to the community, and then we'll talk a little bit about the community.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here with you all today and to get to share a bit of our story. 9 years ago, well, I guess it was over that, almost 10 years ago now, I have a mutual friend of a guy that was participating in prison ministry, and they would go into the prison and do their thing. And I guess after they did the group, they had opportunities to kind of get to know some of the folks one-on-one, of course, following the process that the prison had in place. And all this was going on unbeknownst to me, but a friend of mine was inside the prison system, and one of the gentlemen that he befriended in a one-on-one conversation was letting him know that he was up for parole and that he didn't know if he was going to go to the hearing. That sounded really strange to my friend that has never experienced prison. Why would you not leap to get to a parole hearing? And he said, because this is all I have. It was a confusing response. Like, what do you mean? Like, prison's all you have? Like, I don't understand. And he said, no, this relationship. It was a profound moment for my friend. Like, he's passed now, but I don't know there was a day that went from that day until the day he passed that he didn't talk about that. The power of relationships. That once a month interaction meant so much to him. Like, he was considering foregoing the ability to get out because he didn't think he had anything to come out to. Turns out he did go to the hearing and get paroled, and turned out he was from the neighborhood of Bonton. And so I'm having coffee with a friend of mine one Saturday morning, and he said, hey, I'm sorry, I got to go. I've got a friend. He told me this story I just shared with you. And he said, he started going down to that neighborhood to meet with him after he got paroled. And there's these other guys showing up, and he needs help. There's so many people thirsty. This relationship thing is just so powerful. Mm-hmm. And so I went down there with them, and I'm the crazy one that never left. They all get in their car and go home. And they had such a profound impact on me. I'm an addict in recovery. I've been sober 18 years. There was a time in my life where I identified in a place of hopelessness. Like, I just had no idea of a pathway out for me. And it was in that time that I had people surround me and kind of carry me when I couldn't carry myself. And I met these men almost 10 years after that happened in my life, and it was almost deja vu in a way, but it was also like this really life-giving thing to me, the idea that maybe I could give back what had been given to me.
Okay,
And
so tell us then a little bit about Bonton, the community, and then also like your early days there. Like, you know, what happened kind of in that first, you know, few months or
Yeah, so you know, Bonton is a notorious community. It's an old freedmen's community established after Emancipation Proclamation, after slaves were freed. We're along the Trinity River in Dallas. A lot of freedmen's communities were built along the river because it's a floodplain, and Black folks that were just released trying to find a place to live where they wouldn't be harmed, where they could build a life, needed a place where people wouldn't harass them, you know, and burn crosses and hang them and all the horrible stuff that we know happened. And so the river was a place that they could build and nobody else would build. And so there's several freedmen's communities in Dallas along the Trinity River for that reason. And from that time until today, Bonton's been segregated from the rest of the city. And, you know, I think Bonton is a community that shows what happens when people are cut off from the things the rest of us use to build our lives with. Things like economic opportunity and food access and decent education and transportation. I mean, those are things that I think most of us take for granted, that in places like Bonton, the very basic fabric of tools that we use to build a life with are absent here. And so all I know is that when I came here and those men had such a profound impact on me, I just felt like I needed to be present for them. Like, you know, 2 hours on a Saturday is not really changing anything other than making me feel better about myself. So I needed to be present here. And I fell in love with this neighborhood as much as I fell in love with the people that call it home. It seems like, you know, there's a guy I studied in business school, a famous statistician named Edwards Deming. He's the one that we sent to Japan after World War II to rebuild their economy. And he has this statement that just resonates with me every day in this work we do. He says, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And so in our neighborhood, we have about half our men will go to prison before their 25th birthday. We graduate over the last 40 years, a little over half our kids from high school every year. We have the second highest teen birth rate in the city. We suffer from more than double the rate of cancer and stroke and heart disease and diabetes and childhood obesity than the county we're in. Men in Bonton will live 11 years less than the average lifespan of a man in Dallas County, the county we're in. And so if every system, if Deming is right, and every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets, what is it about the system that's causing such perverted outcomes for our neighborhood? And what can we do to disrupt that system in a way that changes things, not just for the people we have the privilege of serving, but for everybody? And if we could do that in Bonton, could that be done in other places? So
what is the answer to that question? What is it about the systems that creates these?
Well, unfortunately, it goes back to the way our country was founded. First sentence of the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal with certain unalienable rights, but we've never lived into that aspiration. And so we created a country built on a fabric that everybody's not created equal. And in fact, people of color are not human. We treat them less than human and they're not equal. And now I think the attitudes have changed tremendously, but the system that was put in place hasn't. And so we still have inner cities across the country. To me, Bonton is not only an actual place, it's a metaphor for thousands of other places that were built and set up under the same principles and system in place that created this. And so our big dream is that we can, without changing politics or trying to worry about who the president or who's in Senate or Congress, that we have the power to change that system. There's nothing that prevents us from coming in and doing this work to right the wrongs that were set in place by just the way that we failed to meet our founding fathers' aspirations.
So Daron, like on your website, I had read this, that you're located in a food desert, or 63% of residents lack personal transportation, and the
Yeah.
nearest grocery store is a 3-hour round trip bus ride away. So I think this is something that a lot of people take for granted, right? Like access to like fruits and vegetables, and like the ability to hop in a car on a bus and get somewhere quickly. And so this is okay. So if you're 3 hours away, that means it's like an entire day, right? Where if people want to get access to like just the basics of life, it's going to take them 7 hours, right? Well, 3 hours plus whatever shopping time, 5 hours. So that's a good chunk of the day. So then you had this idea for farm. Like you kind of saw the link between health and kind of the flourishing of your community. So tell us about your idea and how that started.
I like to make some of the information we're talking about human by telling stories. If I could just back up and, I've been telling the story you just shared about the food desert thing for a long time, and it was never really contested. And we had a journalist come down and say he's with a program called Verify, and he likes to verify things people say. So he wanted to take me up on, hey, is that really true? So I introduced him to a lady that runs the housing development in our neighborhood, and she introduced him to a single mother there. And this is what it's like for us to get food. The first thing she did is he met her at the apartment at 8 a.m. and she started trying to find a babysitter to watch her children. Took her 2 hours to find a babysitter. She paid that babysitter $15. She went and bought a bus pass for $5. So she's $20 in before she left the door, 2 hours invested before she even walks to the bus stop. Then it's a 3-hour round trip bus ride, and she's able to purchase $30 worth of groceries. So from 8 until noon, it took her to go to the grocery store. She spent $20 to get the right to get to the store, and then was only able to buy $30. And the part of that story that we don't know is, why did she only buy $30? Is it because it's all she had left, or also the complexity of the bus doesn't drop you off in front of your apartment? You have to only buy what you can carry. And so there's these limiting factors that really just make access to decent food incredibly cumbersome, to the point where most people choose to buy and eat what's at the corner store. And as a result, health outcomes are what they are. Mm-hmm. So, that's kind of the story of what people deal with every day. And as I mentioned earlier, these men that I first met would all tell me, if we don't get an opportunity to work, we're going to wind up going back to prison or dying, and nobody was giving them an opportunity to work. So that's how it started. Almost immediately, the men, we started just saying, my question back to them is like, look, what do you have to offer? I worked for a private equity firm before this. We owned 120 something companies. I know people that are in positions that can hire. If I could get you in front of somebody, what do you have to offer? And they look at me like I was speaking Mandarin, like, I'll tell you why they won't hire me. I'll tell you, even someone would say why they shouldn't hire me, but nobody could tell me why they would get hired. And so the only thing I understood, if you don't know your own value, nobody's going to figure it out for you. So we started working to clean up our community, and I would use those work hours to document. Can they do basic things that are valuable in the marketplace, like show up on time and work hard through the course of a day and be a good teammate and be a problem solver? Do you have a positive attitude? All things that are in our control to do. And everybody kept calling in sick. And that's where I learned about the food desert and the health outcomes. And if I'm too sick to work, then that's a precursor. That's more of a root cause. We have to be healthy in mind, body, and spirit to even be able to consider getting a decent education or working. I mean, we're sending the kids to school on a honey bun and Mountain Dew or an empty stomach. It's hard enough for kids to focus and pay attention, much less under those circumstances. So we decided to plant a garden as a way to help start the conversation about getting healthy food. And it gave us something intentional to do every day. And we were...
And when was this, Daron? How long?
Oh, 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, probably sometime in 2012. Okay. When we finally got some food to grow, we grew grass really well in the beginning. And grass and weeds grow easier than vegetables for some reason. But we finally got some vegetables to grow, and one of the guys took a bag of his vegetables and was walking home, and he passed a corner store, and the guy asked him what he had in his bag. And he said, vegetables from our garden. And he said, let me see. He opened it up, and the guy offered him $3 for it. So my friend made the deal, and a code enforcement officer came and wrote him a ticket for it.
Whoa.
I mean, it's like we have enough problems. I just talked about the systemic racism and the systems that are in place that keep communities and the people that call places like Bonton home, unplugged from the resources they need to live. And now we can't grow food and sell it. I was infuriated over that. And so I went to City Hall to pick a fight, and our city was really, they were aware of the problem. They were very embracing of, hey, we're open to suggestions and ideas. Long story short, we walked away with an agreement to start an illegal urban farm that if the reasons they had put ordinances in places that disallowed it were valid, we would stop. And if those things weren't valid, we could help rewrite the ordinances. And so I'm excited to say that was, 6-7 years ago now that all got passed, and we're now the largest urban farm in the United States.
Wow. I just want to make a comment if I can. It's just reminding me, I actually did some work for a medical doctor in Vancouver at the University of British Columbia. He was a physician in epidemiology. So he studied where disease comes from. He said it directly linked to economics.
Yes.
And so, if you're at the top of the food chain, we're talking about food,
Yeah.
You don't get sick as often.
Yeah.
And if you do get sick, you actually recover more quickly. Your heart returns to normal. And they're doing all this testing. But if you're actually poorer, you get sick faster and you stay sick longer.
Yeah.
And it's really hard and takes longer for you to recover from your illness or whatever because of stress. And I think that what you're describing is really stressful. To not have the basics that we all take for granted that we should have. That I feel like that's your right.
Yeah.
Your right to have education, to have nutrition, and for your kids to have the right nutrients in order to learn, because you need vegetables and fruit, well-balanced diet to learn. So man, I'm just I just want to say thank you so much for what you're doing, because I feel like what you're doing is so holistic. You're not just feel like you're providing food, but you're also addressing the systemic issues.
Yeah, I think this is really, this is the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. I tell people I don't make any money anymore, but I feel like the richest man in Dallas. The relationships, the difference that you get to make, I think so. Maybe the most important thing to me is as a white man in a predominantly Black community that has been just abused from the outset, to be a part of helping heal some of those wounds, instead of what we see in the world today is this chaos of all those wounds being reopened and salt poured in them. Not just reopened, but let's see how bad we can irritate this. And I really feel like when we come together and see that all our communities, especially those like Bonton, have opportunity to be put on equal footing, then the people do the work. The people here are amazing. It's not a people issue. I think all too often in our world, we look at these issues and we try to address the problem as if the people were the issue. And in almost every instance, it's a systemic issue. There's barriers. Men and women coming home from incarceration that don't have IDs or driver's license, and you get sent to a state or federal prison, you come home and you have local tickets for failing to put on a signal. Well, that doesn't go away just because you were in prison. So now I come home and I have 9 warrants for my arrest and I just served 10 years in prison. That's a barrier. That's a systemic problem that causes more people to go back to prison unnecessarily. And those are the things I think we can root out and change. And I don't think we need permission. I think we can just get to work.
Daron, I've heard a number of stories where people who have been in just really hard situations have said oh, it just took one person to give me a chance, right? That, just something that kind of gets people out of the cycle that kind of perpetuates itself. So sometimes generationally. So you in Bonton, how many people actually live in your community?
It's about 2,500. About 2,500. It's about 1.91 square miles, and there's about 2,500 people that call Bonton home.
Okay, and then how many people do you employ?
We have 40 full-time employees, give or one or take. It changes quite regularly. And then we have the main program is what we call a paid internship. It's really people, men and women, that are coming out of incarceration or substance abuse or homelessness or domestic abuse or human trafficking, that are no longer locked up or beaten or high anymore. But there's also this huge chasm between where they were and where they need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And I view Bonton Farms as that bridge that spans the chasm between what they've endured and where they aspire to go. And so we have about 40 paid interns, the interns that are not employable yet, but they're there doing the really hard work of learning how to live again. We have a domestic abuse victim that was never been allowed to touch money. So now she's been in a safe house for 6 months. The threat seems to be gone, but I don't know how to shop. I don't know how to go to a bank. I don't know how to use a debit card. I don't know how to balance a checkbook. I don't know how to count change because I've been so controlled. And so the things that we go back to learn, sometimes I'm always like, never underestimate how much we need to ask the right questions to make sure we're building in the skills and the tools that people need to be successful once they don't need us anymore.
So do you have like a group of counselors that you work with, or is that part of your staff? How does that work?
We do both. They're counseling. A lot of the men and all the, this is the interesting thing. People will sometimes ask the question of how many people you serve struggle with mental illness. And my question is all of us do, and me included, right? I mean, I'm an addict in recovery because I didn't have the system mentally to deal with things that most people do. So I've had to learn a way on my own. And I think everybody we serve has some degree of trauma that has been so significant. It is a mental illness, even if it's not a diagnosis like schizophrenia or bipolar or something. So we have trauma counselors that are real doctors and counselors. And then we just have a bunch of people on our staff that are trained and have learned to walk with people on their journey. And sometimes we get in over our head and we have to call in the real doctors to help us navigate through things and teach us how to better serve really serious issues. You have a guy with us right now that came about a month ago, and he got sentenced to life in prison without parole at 15. He's been in prison 45 years, and not sure if it was the First Step Act or COVID, but his sentence became eligible for parole, and he made it. But I don't know what it's like to be gone. He hadn't learned to live at 15 before he got locked up. And now 45 years later, the world has changed so much. He was way more free in prison than he is out here. And so his ability to make it is contingent on our relationship. I think you guys were talking about it. I need this much. I just need a chance. I need somebody to believe in me. And we just want to be that somebody. Yeah.
We had somebody on the podcast last week who is she's a victim of human trafficking, and she was in that for 6 years before she was able to escape. And she had used this phrase that she's like, all I need is a second. She's like, I just need a second to think. She's like, I just need to stop and think. But she didn't have that because life was just kind of kept going. Okay. So Daron, when I look at you, here's what I see. I see an entrepreneur. I see a friend. I see a mentor. I see a pastor in you. I see a counselor. I see a hope giver. Like you wear all these hats, right? Yeah. So how do you restore and rest and keep up your energy for like what has to be kind of emotionally? I know you said this was the best, most rewarding thing you've ever done, and I believe it. Like I honestly believe that. But I also know that you're one person, and so how do you keep going when you have all this emotional? It's really heavy stuff.
I mean, I think that's a great question, and there's a lot of answers to it. One of them is we say all the time that we give away what we possess. Like you can't help it. Whatever you're filled with comes out. And so it's really important for us to be healthy. The people that we serve depend on us to give away optimism and hope and confidence and resiliency and encouragement. And I can't do that if I'm not well. So we have a system within our team to try to watch ourselves, because a lot of times I'll get run down and start getting a little edgy and I don't notice it. My team notices it before me. So it's really important to do this work, that you have a framework and give people permission, that we humble ourselves enough that we can take somebody pulling us aside and saying, you need to take a step back because you're giving away what you possess and it ain't pretty. The other thing is we're not God. We can't change people. Our job every day is to show up and do the best we can and to trust the process, that if we're smart at what we do, if we're strategic at what we do, if we're serious to get to the root of things and not just jump in midstream, and if we do it with excellence, then we're going to win some and lose some. And I don't control that, because if you take ownership of the victories, you start to think you're more than you are. And if you really own up to the defeats you have, you would die soon. There's no way to I lose people that I love dearly. And you can't take that on as a personal thing. We just do our best. And the very first guy that I met when I came to Bonton that first day that opened the door, he had just been released from prison that week and had an ankle monitor on. 10 years later, he's in rehab. We've walked with him for 10 years. It's not his time yet. I hope it is this time. But he has struggled, and we've had hard conversations, and we're not enablers to continue in the old way. So there's been times where we've had to say, look, I'm sorry, I love you, but if I even catch you sitting in the shade of my tree, I'm going to call the police, because I don't want you to be comfortable. I want you to be so miserable you're finally willing to get help. And that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But because we didn't quit, because we did it out of love all the time, and because we didn't enable, 10 years later, he's in a place to get the help that he finally needs. And we just hope and pray that it takes, but it's not on us to do. It is our job to do our part well.
I do pray a prayer that gives me hope. I don't know if you do, but like I do. And it's this one prayer. And I say, thank you, God, that you are God. I am not.
Yes.
It helps me remember my perspective, keeps perspective, reminds me of my role. I am not God. And so we do trust that God has everything in his hand. He's sovereign over everything. And that gives me hope. But we are to, like you said, do our part, even though sometimes it's tough love sometimes, but you're doing it because you can see where they can go. You know what I mean? You have vision and hope almost for them too. Right. Mm-hmm. And you're cheering them on. And that cheering might look really, really hard at the time. But I really am appreciative of the fact that you are in community as well, and that you have people who also care for you and you care for others too.
Yeah. It's a really hard thing to do. It's a great question. It's a really hard thing to do. And people that endeavor to do this kind of work, it's important to build as many protection mechanisms around you as possible.
Yeah. I guess my question is, you've been here now for doing this for 10 years. Is that right? Wow. Huge congratulations. That's massive. It also is a testimony to your grit, which is one of our hero traits too. So another hero trait I want to add to you. But what have you learned? How has this changed you?
Oh man, the thing is, you can't outgive, right? So the more you try to serve and give, the more comes back. And it's like gravity. It's just a law. You may as well embrace it. And again, I like to humanize things. So I want to tell you a story. Do we have time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a guy that walks through our neighborhood named Chris Tucker. He's a good friend of mine now, but he scared me when I first moved in. He looks really unkempt and disheveled. He may have 4 teeth in his head. He walks around with a old transistor radio that has the old knobs on it still duct taped around his neck. And he carries, I don't know if you ever remember that movie Walking Tall from, I'm old. So it was when I was a kid, but this sheriff had a stick, like a 4 or 5 foot long log that he would whittle down and he would carry. And when people get out of line, it was this Walking Tall stick. So he walks through the neighborhood with that stick. So whenever I would be out front and he would walk by, I would just try to look the other way because I didn't want to encounter him. And then when the garden idea started, I was out there in the garden one morning and I could see him walking up the street. So I just tried to look down as long as I could and act busy. And then I thought enough time had passed, I looked up and sure enough, he had stopped. And so I looked up and our eyes met and I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. So I just said, good morning. And he said, good morning, and walked across the street. And he's a master gardener. He's an amazing man. He has taught me so much. One is to not judge a book by its cover, because I'm a jerk and I do that still way too often. But he came over and he started teaching me things that I've never heard before, fascinating things. He was telling me, because it was the first year we planted this garden and it was struggling. When your soil's not right, everything goes wrong, right? Bugs and diseases and fungus and all kinds of stuff get in the garden and wreak havoc on it. I'm having all these problems, but I'm wanting to do it organically. So I'm fighting the system. And he's like, why don't you just relax? The bugs are your friend. I'm like, well, they don't look like my friend. They're eating all our food. And he said, no, they're like lions. Garden pests are like lions. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, they never attack the gazelle at the front. It's always the one with the limp in the back, right? They're showing you the weak things, and they're weeding out the weak things so that the strong things can survive. Work with them.
Whoa.
Quit fighting them. And I'm like, I've never heard any of this stuff before. And in the middle of this profound gardening lesson, life lesson, he says, I got to go. Now, this is a day kind of like today in Dallas. It was 60 degrees this morning, and it's supposed to be 90 this afternoon. We were in the cool part of the morning, and I was like, oh, Chris, please don't go. Wait till it warms up, right? And you can go then. And he said, no, I got to go pay my bills. And I'm like, oh, of course you can wait to pay your bills. Wait till it's hot to pay your bills inside. And he said, no, I'm going to pay my bills right now. I love to pay my bills. And I'm like, Chris Tucker, you're a sick man. And no, bills, there was a time where I couldn't pay my bills, and now I can, and I love to pay my bills.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm like such an idiot, right? 7 years or 8 years goes by. Last month or so, he's walking by, and I said, hey, Chris, I want to tell you something. I said, for all these years, I just want you to know I've never thought of paying my bills the same since you taught me that lesson. And I tell your story every chance I get. So it encourages other people not to take things for granted. And without missing a beat, he said, you know what? I think bills are the greatest invention that we've ever come up with. A whole different thing, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, think about it. I can pay my water bill today, and then I can walk over to my faucet and I can turn it on and clean water comes out. I don't even have to go collect it. I don't have to boil it. I don't have to worry if it's clean. I can simply pay a bill and I have fresh water. What a great invention.
Well, thanks, because I have to pay my credit card bill today. So
I could go on, but I get such richness from people that have lived without so much, and in living without so much of the peripheral stuff, the main things are the main things, and they keep me grounded, and they keep me, they teach me to be grateful every day, and they teach me how valuable we are for each other, that we all have something to offer, especially people you might not think do.
So Daron, how many years do people typically work with you? And then what happens? Like, I know people are all different, but is there like a general pattern that you know? Are you like a stepping stone sometimes to other things, or? Yeah.
We view ourselves as that bridge, right? To build the chasm between where you were and where you aspire to go. But because this is a real thing to us, this is not some program. It's not about funding. I don't care. I feel like we've been really fortunate that when you put people first, the rest of it just seems to work out. But so it's open-ended. You're here for as long as you need us. And the minute you don't, we love to send you off and give you the little push out of the nest and watch it fly. The average, though, if you were to put numbers to it, it takes us about 18 months on average to get somebody from where they enter to job ready. And for us, job ready is just a milestone. I thought it was the end all be all. And the truth of the matter is we can get just about anybody job ready in a job. That becomes the most dangerous part of the recovery journey, because once I'm working full time, it changes my habits and the people I'm around and the time that I have to invest back into myself. A lot of the things that we think are most powerful are the simple things like relationships. And when we're in relationship working together every day, and I'm well because you help me be well, and then all of a sudden I go out into a work environment that's probably not real life-giving. It's just about doing a job. And then I lose that relationship. It's really a sensitive spot where a lot of people revert backwards. And so a job for us is a milestone that indicates success, but it's also when we buckle down and say, okay, now the big test comes. Like, this was your second biggest test from the day you showed up here and had nothing. The second biggest test will be the day you start work and have to kind of start learning how to care for yourself outside of all of the framework that we put in place to do that already.
Right. Wow. Like the scaffolding on a building,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Like
You guys, and then, so I'm curious, all right, so Mr. Entrepreneur, my hope, I'm guessing your hope is that this is replicable, replicatable, anyway, that other people can really listen to this podcast and go, oh yes, that's exactly what I want to do. Or they're in a community already and they just don't know what to do. What would your advice be for them?
Well, a big question. I mean, I think that regardless of who you are, especially if you're like me and you're an outsider, the first piece of advice is you can't come into anywhere and fix anything. Like shut up and listen. Sit in the back seat, absorb, and then follow a rule that you don't do anything that you don't get invited into through relationships.
Right.
The worst damage that can be done is somebody coming in from outside and thinking that these poor people need me to fix their problems. It will not work. You'll hurt a lot of people in the process and it won't last. So that would be that's the starting point. Like, don't do that.
Hey, Darren, can I pause you really quick? And then, sorry, when you came into the community, was there resistance? Did you find resistance?
Still resistance.
Okay.
We had somebody think, anytime things go wrong here, it's the white guy, right? And it's understandable. I look like the thing that's caused a lot of pain. And the fact that my neighbors trust me enough to let me be here is a privilege, right? So don't hear that wrong. It's deserved. But it's always contested. People come down to Bonton Farms and it's like kumbaya. It really is the most beautiful, peaceful place, probably in all of Dallas, right tucked in one of the most notorious inner city communities. But outside of that campus is life. And it's a bigger community with a capital C. And that community with a capital C, there's a third of them that wish I was dead. There's a third of them that would just don't care and would rather quit hearing about it. And there's a third of them that would die for us. And so there's this constant tension. It's a battle, and it's a battle we're fighting, but it is not what it appears on the surface if you just come and glance in without spending much time here. It's hard work.
Okay, great, thanks. Wow. Yeah, sorry, you can continue. So that was your first point, and then I interrupted.
Yeah, I think I think that the second thing would be is to really try to analyze. I think in today's age, for some reason, we don't ask deep enough questions. And whatever question you ask, you get the answer of equal quality to the quality of question. And so when people talk about homelessness, I think it's one of the reasons why you assume almost by identifying the issue as homelessness that maybe what they need is a home. And that's a part of an equation, but there's a reason why they became homeless. What is the question behind the question? And I think if you're going to get into this space, people deserve our best. And for our best to matter, we have to ask really deep root cause questions and start from there. I think that's really, really critical. If you think about how that affects Dallas, we have about 27,000 nonprofits that do work in these kind of spaces with vulnerable people groups, about $1 billion a year, but every macro level indicator is getting worse. How can that be? And I think it's on us. 2 years ago, I got to give a TED Talk, and it was a profound time for me because nobody's ever wanted to hear about Bonton before. In fact, the city was trying to change the name of it because it had such a bad reputation. And now I get invited to do a TED Talk to share about my community, and I'm the one getting to tell their story. It's a weighty thing. Like they haven't been able to tell their story yet. So I want to do that well and honor the people that I represent. And the lady that spoke before me was a smart cities person talking about how we have autonomous vehicles driving on our cars today, right? That cars at 70 miles an hour are making billions of calculations a second to be safer on their highways than they are with cars with us behind the wheel. And the person that spoke after me was a geneticist in the Mayo Clinic talking about something dear to me, because I have so many people down here that are suffering from diabetes-induced kidney failure, right? So the whole transplant thing is a big deal here for people I love and serve. And she's talking about how the whole thing of checking the box on your driver's license, to care flighting an organ with integrity from somebody that had an accident and expired to the person that needed it, and the rejection medicine, all that's a thing of the past, because they can take stem cells from your own body and with your own DNA, make a brand new heart, make a brand new liver and kidney and lung. And I'm up there talking about, we live in the richest country in the history of the world, and we have 40 communities in Dallas, Texas, one of the richest cities in the richest country in the history of the world, and we don't have access to food. Like, which one of these things doesn't belong? And I take that as a personal challenge and issue the challenge out to whoever hears this, that some of these things we're facing in our country today should have been solved a long time ago, and we have no excuse but to get to work. And so I hope that this somehow encourages others to step into the gap, because we need change. I think our country's crying out desperately for this, and we're looking at all the wrong places. The power's within us, the community, whatever city we're in, whatever community we're nearby, whatever people that are near us that don't have an opportunity for the things that we've had. When we step into that gap and build real solutions and ask the right questions, we change things for people forever.
Yeah, because I feel like everybody is placed for a purpose, you know, and if you are looking at policy, to look at it with maybe fresh eyes and to say who wins and who loses with this policy, and is it a policy that can be changed or should be changed? And if that's the case, then, you know, you have your work ahead of you, which is helpful. Like, instead of us like just going along status quo, I feel like status quo isn't helping.
Yeah, we're not making, it feels like we're doing a lot of spinning our wheels, right? We're working really hard and making really little progress. And I think we need to be a little smarter, work equally as hard, but we can work smarter and get further down the road quicker.
So what I love about this, Daron, is that I feel like I'm having kind of like this epiphany moment, and I'm trying to like process it in my head. But what I hear you saying is it's almost like we're taking an upside down view of the world, right? And so when you got up or when you had some people saying, no, we don't want you to call the farm Bonton Farm because of the history or, you know, the neighborhood. What you are saying is you're like, no, we're going to redeem and restore what's here. Absolutely. You know, you don't, when we see something that's we perceive as broken, or, you know, hopeless or helpless, it's like, you don't just throw it away and then create this wonderful, gleaming, beautiful new thing. Right. It's kind of like this worldview that sees things in other people that we don't normally see, and then we bring them out. And I think that's what you're doing. You're kind of like a developer and a dreamer together. So just one closing thought on that. So then it kind of brings me back to seeing the world through fresh eyes, and using the gifts that we've been given to do that. So with you, can you love personal stories. So can you end with a story of somebody that you've worked with that you've seen their lives changed and they're just really flourishing right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, you know. I have, I'm going to try to do a rapid fire thing. Like we have a guy that was really struggling, got caught up in the streets and went through a 6 or 8 week job training program and just didn't have any of the tools he really needed to be successful, but he was white knuckling it. Like, I'm not going to leave this to go back to the streets no matter what. But he was miserable. He was living in a place that was filled with bed bugs and the water was leaking in. He was controlled by a slumlord. He was trying to be a father because he didn't have one, and he swore he didn't want to follow that path. So I don't know how to do that. You know, I don't know how to interact with people at my work. I just come home angry and you know, drink and smoke and do whatever I can to relax because I don't know how to handle that the right way. And we're like, why don't you back up and come and let's start over, right? And so he came to Bonton Farms, and he became a farmer, and we worked with him, and we were able to buy a home here that because it was so dangerous that his family was in the situation, we said, why don't you move into there and pay rent? You can pay the same amount you're paying in the other place, and we'll work to remediate your credit. And then when your credit's good enough, we'll help you get a mortgage and it'll be your home. And so we did that. And he came to the farm 6 months or so ago and said, I'm in trouble. And we're like, what's going on? He said, well, I'm behind on my house payment. Why? And he said, well, because it went up and I don't understand. So he brought us the paperwork. Long story short, his taxes went up $100 a month, and he hadn't been able to keep up. They had some other things come up. And the bottom line is he got angry. He's like, why are my taxes up? Like, how can they just do that to me? They don't have to call you or anything, right? We're like, no, Danny, I'm sorry. They don't owe you that. We just have to pay the taxes. But the good news is they've evaluated, you paid less than 2 years ago, you paid $70,000 for this house, and they valued it at $130,000. Well, why can they do that? How can they do that? I'm like, well, because 2 houses on your block sold for $130,000. And he's like, well, what does that mean? I was like, Danny, what that means in less than 2 years, you've got $60,000 that you've earned. And he's like, how? And I said, you know what? Because every time you walk down the street and you walk by that corner store and you see one of those youngsters out posted up selling dope, you tell them, don't do that here. There's a better way. And you pick up trash when you go along. And now not only do you reap the rewards of your family being safe and your daughter's in school and you feel comfortable and secure, but your community's better. And because your community's better, your property value's gone up because it's a desirable place to be. It's not a place to fear anymore. And you get to profit from that, not just because of all the other reasons, but in wealth accumulation as well. This year, we opened up an internship for kids in school in the summer, the first time we've done that at the farm. And we have 2 children from men that came through our program earlier. All those kids were in school, and to see that generation and how radically different they are because the foundation their parents fought for them, that these kids are capable, they're equipped, they're in college, and they're not going to go down. The cycle for that family has been broken because that parent paid the price and set their kids up on a different path. And even though they grew up here, they didn't become a victim of this place. They are coming back to be a part of its redemption, but they are definitely a different breed. And we just get to see the snowball effect of this in story after story.
Wow.
So good. So good. Well, I hope that everybody listening has taken away a lot. There's a lot here, Daron. There's a lot here. So one, that we all can do something. Like, you saw a need, you stepped into it, even though you were an outsider. You kind of took stock, asked the right questions, invested in people and relationships, and really cared. Like you said, putting people first. And then 2, I just think the power of transformational stories and the potential that all of us, every single person in this world has, to fulfill their dreams and to be contributing and being, seen as equal and well. And I just love it. So I'm really grateful that you are on the podcast, Daron. Thanks for joining us.
Can I say 2 things in closing?
Yeah, go ahead.
One is, to your point, never underestimate the power of people, like, because of what they look like or what they've been through. There's so much goodness under there that's worth bringing out, that's worth fighting for. And the second thing is that you may hear this story and think it's overwhelming because it's a big story, but everybody has a role to play. And so find your role, and you can just be a mentor. You don't have to be all of those things. You can be a mentor. You can help the businesses we try to operate to create jobs run better. If you're a gifted business person, if you're a marketer, we need help marketing. If you're a lawyer, we have people that struggle with legal issues. If you're a mother, we need help teaching mothers how to mother that didn't have the same benefit of that. Or if you're a father, teaching somebody trying to be a father to be a father. There's a place for everybody. And so I hope that maybe through this, people will be encouraged, that not overwhelmed, but find a place that they can have a role to make a difference in their own way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and Darren, I have to tell you that we were talking to Ryan, your amazing assistant. He was, I told him, I said, if you guys ever need help, I am totally here for you. I'm like your long distance cheerleader over here. So um, thanks for joining us. And everybody, we're going to be linking to all of Darren's social media and to Bonton's, all the great work that they're doing. And if you guys feel led to be part of that or encourage Darren, I would highly encourage you to do that. So thanks, Ann. Thanks for another great episode. Any final words from Toronto?
Oh, I just feel like wanting to go down to Dallas and like actually come visit.
Yeah.
Like
We're caravanning down there, Darren.
these amazing people that you are, that are inspiring. Yeah. So thanks so much, Darren. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, and I hope all of you guys were encouraged by this story, and I hope that it moves you guys to realize that the people around you matter, and your love for them matters, and that every little word and every deed you do can make the world a little bit better. So we'll see you guys next time.